Shalom and greetings, friends. Now, both Judaism and Christianity are longing passionately for a future Messiah, a Moshiach, to bring peace to the earth, to literally come to this earth to inaugurate an everlasting kingdom which will reign forever on the earth and put all nations to peace and to solve the world's problems under his leadership. And of course, it will be one world order under his leadership, not anyone who comes along and poses as that type of a leadership, but only he will be able to actually truly do it. Many may claim to do it or want to do it, but it has to be under his leadership. Now, unfortunately, not all of Judaism, of course, and not all of Christianity, for that matter of fact, is not seeing this literal return or literal coming of a Messiah to do this in a literal physical way for the nations of this earth. But I'm speaking generally among those who know their scriptures, the holy inspired scriptures. And so I want to encourage everyone to get to know these scriptures, the inspired ones, and also any writings that support it. And although I do not know or haven't studied as much as some of you out there, and I do not know even the Talmud and the Mishnah as much as some of you Orthodox rabbis out there, if you're listening in, I hope you are, and even some of the conservative Jewish believers who have been reading their Talmud and their Mishnah and know these things and study the oral law even more so than I. But I've been learning it, and I've been finding that it's quite interesting, very interesting to see the similarities between the messianic prophecies that are between the Talmud and the New Testament, as many people call it. In Hebrew, we call it the Brit Hadashah, or the New Covenant writings. In fact, all the writings of the Brit Hadashah were Jewish writers, if you didn't know that. But they were, all of them. Some people debate about Luke, and there's some scholarly debate about that, but the evidence seems to lean a lot more towards even Luke being primarily Jewish, or at least half so. But nevertheless, before we continue, I don't want to say that extra writings, even the Talmud, I'm not saying that it's perfectly inspired, that it's all inspired like the written word that has been preserved, because a lot of it is commentary, as I've coming to understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a lot of midrash in there, and great sages and rabbis are even disagreeing among themselves. So when there's disagreement and contradictory teachings, then somebody's got to be wrong and somebody's got to be right, or maybe both are wrong. You know, I think we can all logically see that possibility, but there's a lot of good commentary. Christians like to rely on commentaries, and a lot of Christian scholarly commentaries are, wrong in certain areas. But there's a lot of good in there too. And there's a lot of good historical evidence. There's a lot of good ways to explain the original languages and understand the original writings better from the original languages that have been preserved over the centuries. And so I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater with either camp here, but notice the similarities. And although we may not know this Mashiach perfectly or well enough, or who he is, but it will be revealed, and he will be the same for both the Jews and the Gentiles. The whole world will have the same Messiah. And so I want to encourage everybody to notice the similarities that we can have in our faith, and look forward to what is coming ahead. And this is what the gospel is truly about, the coming kingdom of the Almighty. and how it was preached to Abraham. It was preached to Israel. We can see that in Galatians 3:8, if you go to the Brit Hadashah, and also in Hebrews 4, verses 1 and 2. The same gospel was preached to Abraham, Isaac, and even Israel, and they looked forward to this kingdom and the Mashiach, the Messiah to come. And so let's notice the similarities. And if you know the Talmud well, you're probably familiar with the two-part coming, the twofold coming of the Messiah. How Messiah ben Joseph, and Ben, if your name is Ben out there and you don't know Hebrew, it simply means son. So hey, son, or Ben, that's what it is. So Messiah, son of Joseph, or Messiah ben Joseph, or Yosef, as we say in Hebrew. And then there's the Messiah ben David, and that's the kingship coming of the Mashiach. The Messiah ben Yosef is the suffering servant. And this is in the Talmud. This isn't, although it's in agreement with the New Testament, the Brit Hadashah, the twofold coming of Messiah, a lot of people do not like to see the similarities if there's a prejudice that's still harboring in our hearts. Whether you're anti-Semitic, you're going to hate the Talmud and put it down and not want to see the similarities and say, oh, well, they got it from us. And if you hate the New Testament or the Brit Hadashah, you'll say the other way around, that, well, the New Testament got it from us, the Talmud, and or from the oral law, which predates the written New Testament. And so, there's a lot of debate. But like I said, it's interesting how our Father is so merciful. He'll reveal some of the same prophecies, the same truths to both camps here in the Talmud, the Mishnah, and even in Christian commentaries and throughout the New Testament writings, as many people call it. And so, the Messiah ben Joseph, remember Joseph, he was betrayed by his own brothers. All of his brothers that were living at the time betrayed him and sold him into slavery. They wanted him dead. And so we see in fact, all the prophets suffered, were types of Mashiach, Messiah, coming in advance. And so it's not strange. It should not be strange to even consider, even read from ancient sages such as Rabbis Akiva and Rambam and Rashi and so forth. So you can see that the Mashiach will suffer. And like from Noah, he had to build this ark for 120 years. I mean, that's a long time to be doing hard work, and why not just get it on and get the plan, the prophecy going? He had to have a lot of patience and obedience and faith and put downs from the world around him, rejected other than his own family at that time. And we could see David, King David, he was anointed as a teenager to become the king, but while he was still a shepherd, but he had to go through years of suffering, even being chased and hunted by the leaders of Israel, the posses of King Saul, and wanting to kill him. And he wasn't until he was 30 that he actually obtained that kingship. So there was a lot of suffering. We could go to, like I said, the prophets and the faithful men and even women, as we see in the scriptures of what many call the Old Testament, the Tanakh. And it's important to see that the Messiah is very similar. And what's also similar in both the Talmud and the New Testament, and I don't want to get too much onto that, but getting to the main topic here, is that the Talmud and New Testament talk about how the Moshiach will be coming from the sky. The next time we see the anointed one, and the difference in belief is, will it be his first coming or his second coming? but nevertheless, he will be coming from the sky. And this is in the Talmud, and I won't quote too much here, but if you doubt me, please go to the Babylonian Talmud. I'll give you one quote here, or at least one source of information. You can check it out. It's in Tractate Sanhedrin. Tractate Sanhedrin, folio, Folio, 98A, and also read B, and you'll see that. Now, in the Brit Hadashah, if you're not familiar with it, let me also read in Matthew chapter how similar this is to what even we see in the Talmud. In Matthew chapter 24, verses 30 and 31, it says, "And the sign of the Son of Man." Now it's key here. Son of Man is just not just a New Testament term that the Messiah, Yeshua, many of you know him as Jesus, he referred to himself as the Son of Man. It's not just a New Testament thing here. We find it throughout the Tanakh of the Old Testament scriptures. We'll get to a little bit later, but it's also in the Talmud. The Son of Man is referring to Mashiach. And so he is referring to himself as this, as we quote him here. He says, "Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn." They're going to cry, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So this is not the Messiah ben Yosef. This is the Messiah ben David here talking about the second coming, the second-fold coming of the Messiah. And it says here, "And he will send his angels with great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds of the four corners of the earth, and from one end of heaven to another." Now this is interesting because even in the Holy Day, many refer to today in Judaism as Rosh Hashanah, and in Hebrew means head of the year, but it's actually the first day of the 7th month, and it's more technically accurately referred to in Scripture as Yom Teruah, or Teruah, and that's Day of Trumpets. It's a feast day. It comes once a year, first day of the 7th month according to the Creator's calendar, and even in Orthodox Judaism they see that as an anniversary, or I should say a rehearsal of the coming Messiah will come on this day from the sky, from the clouds. If you know, the Chabadniks, the Chabad know this, and many other sects of Judaism are understanding this more and more, that he will come. And it's right here in the book of Mattiyahu. Mattiyahu, or we say in modern English as Matthew, but his Hebrew name here. So I find that interesting, and not just that, but also both in the Talmud, this is what I want to focus more time on here, and in the New Testament we see the teaching similar, that the Messiah is coming to this earth from the sky, and kingship will be from the sky, on the clouds, and to set his feet on the Mount of Olives. So when he comes in as Messiah ben David, or David, he will come, and he will actually come and set his feet on the Mount of Olives. Mount of Olives is a very historical mount that many in Christianity and Judaism need to learn more about. It's not just a nice mountain near Jerusalem, but Olives and Mount, this is where a lot of history has happened from the prophets, from Abraham, and onward. And also it's where the Messiah was even crucified. And I know the Christians and a lot of scholars think it's somewhere else, but the word Mashiach, or Messiah in Hebrew, let me expound upon this a little bit before we get to the Mount of Olives, because we need to understand the Hebrew a little bit better to get a deeper level understanding of the scriptures here. If the word Mashiach is in the verb, simply means to oil, anointed one. It's like oil and you have to crush the olive to get the oil. So you crush, there's a crushing, a smearing, and a development to get that oil. And so when it becomes a noun, it goes from a verb to a noun, it becomes the anointed one. And that's talking in terms of kingship especially. Even King David was anointed, Mashiach, anointed in the noun sense, but he was a type of Mashiach. And anyone who's anointed by him is, but the ultimate Mashiach, the one, the anointed one, as we read about even in the prophecy of Daniel, chapter 9, about him being cut off after the 69 weeks, we see that it is referring to the Mashiach will be cut off. He'll be crushed. He will be crucified on the Mount of Olives. And then we're going to see that he ascended from the Mount of Olives after his resurrection, and he will come back to the Mount of Olives. This Mount of Olives is very sentimental to the Creator, and there's a lot of past and future exciting information to learn about the Mount of Olives. So, and I say this also because a lot of Christians out there think that they believe in this rapture theory, that Mashiach will come in the sky and that we're going to be raptured up and then just go to heaven and be up there where there's no problems. Everything's perfect up there, but the problems are down here. And if we continue the prophecy, it doesn't stop meeting him in the air, but it actually will be to bring that peace. And he will set his feet on the Mount of Olives. And let's get to that. It traces back to Zechariah chapter 14. So if you want to turn with me, you can push pause on this video at any time. Turn to your own scriptures. Check up on me. Please don't just believe me. I'm not expecting anybody just to believe me, but check up on me. And if we go to Zechariah 14, and it says here, "Behold, the day of the Almighty is coming. For your spoil will be divided in your midst, for I will gather all nations to battle against Jerusalem, as we say in English, and the city shall be taken." Notice, the city is taken. Now some people believe that this is at the end of the 1,000 years. And we're going to get to that. No, at the end of the 1,000 years, yeah, there's going to be a repeat of this history, but it will be a complete failure. At the beginning of the 1,000 years, before the Mashiach sets up this millennial peace, we will see that the city will be taken. It says here, the houses rifled, or plundered. The women will be ravished, to say the least. It's going to be not such a good time in history, and I'm sad to hear about this and know this, but it's true. He says, half of the city shall go into captivity. This will not happen at the end of the 1,000 years. This is at the beginning of the 1,000 years, when the Mashiach comes to this earth and comes to the Mount of Olives and establishes his kingship from Jerusalem. Okay, continuing in verse 2, "But the remnant of the people shall not be cut off from the city." So there's going to be a protection of the remnant, the faithful ones. "Then the Lord, the Almighty, will go forth and fight against the nations." So there's going to be a battle against the Messiah. It's not going to just, everyone's going to lay down their weapons and say, "Okay, whatever you say." There's going to be a little battle here. He says, "And he fights in that day." He says, in that day, not 1,000 years later, but in that day. "And in that day his feet shall stand," verse 4. This is verse 4, Zechariah 14, chapter 14, verse 4. "In that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives shall be split in two from the east to the west." So this mountain will be split in two by the Messiah. This is a powerful coming, not just as a human being here. It says, "From the east to the west, making a very large valley. Half of the mountain shall move toward the north, and half of it towards the south." And then it continues there. You can read more about this. And it's the beginning of the 1,000-year reign. And that's what's very interesting to take note here, that Jerusalem will be taken. Now, in the New Testament, or the Brit Hadashah, I'm going to just turn to Revelation 20, verses 7 through 9. We'll see at the end of the 1,000 years, the same thing will happen, but it will not be taken. It will be a complete failure by the enemies of Israel and Jerusalem and the Mashiach. So let me go to Revelation chapter 20, verses 7 through 9. It says, "Now when the 1,000 years had expired, and Hasatan, or Satan, Ha in Hebrew means the, Satan is another way of pronouncing Satan. The Satan, or the adversary is a better way of saying it, will be released from his prison." So he's going to put in some kind of a prison, a containing place where he can't affect the nations for this 1,000 years like he's doing today. But he will be let out again, and he will go forth and deceive the nations again. Wow, how could that happen after 1,000 years of peace? But it'll happen. And, he will deceive the nations from the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, to those whose numbers as the sand of the sea. So it's going to be another huge uprising and a revolt against the holy ones. And they will go up beneath from the earth and surround the camp of the saints. These are the saints, these are the believers. And the beloved city. And fire came down from the Almighty out of heaven. So the fire is going to come down from the Almighty, from heaven, and devour them. And the devil who deceived them will be cast into a lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and they will be tormented. And then it goes on there that they will be gone forever. So they'll be let out for a little bit of a time, but all I see here is a complete failure. There's no city taken, half the city into captivity. There's no ravishing of the women, and so forth. The Messiah is not going to let that happen at the end of the 1,000 years. It's going to happen at the beginning, and the reason is he wants us to cry out to him, to want him to come back. There's a percentage of Judaism that will be crying out at that time, that he expects to cry out, Baruch haba Bashem Adonai, or however you want to pronounce his name. It means blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And also there's a prerequisite to that the fullness of the Gentiles must be fulfilled. And it's another whole teaching in itself, taken from Romans 11, and also Deuteronomy, Devarim 32:21. And so that has to be fulfilled before we can really cry out to that. But it's interesting to notice that the Messiah will come back to this earth, and he will try to straighten it out, and try and work on this earth without the deceptive evil spirits' influence. And we can see this in Daniel. I'd like to go to Daniel as also double emphasis here to really hit home on this, that our Messiah is coming to this earth to help work on this earth for 1,000 years with the right government. So if you want to turn with me to Daniel chapter 7, I'm going to read verses 12 through 14 here. Daniel 7 and verse 12, it says, "And for the rest of the beasts," and as we know, the beasts in Daniel are symbolic of nations and kingdoms, and it's even explained a little bit through Daniel. But it says here, "And they had their dominion taken away." These beasts will be taken away, "yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time." Now verse 13, here's the Almighty here. He's saying, "And I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man." This is quoting Daniel here. Here we see the term Son of Man, referring to Mashiach, Messiah. It's not like just a New Testament or a Talmud concept, but this is in all three of these sources that I'm quoting from. Coming with the clouds of heaven, he came to the Ancient of Days. So the Messiah coming to the Ancient of Days, the Father here. And they brought him near before him. Then to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom. This is referring to the Son of Man. That all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom the one which shall not be destroyed. So he will set this up when he comes. There will be 1,000 years of peace, and there will be another revolt after that one more time, and it'll be unsuccessful because his kingdom will not be ravished. It will not be plundered. It will not even half of it will be taken once he comes to this earth and sets his feet on the Mount of Olives in a special way. So, interesting. If we can understand the chronology, we can understand the similarities in our faith, we can see the same Messiah. We can understand his twofold coming. And that all the problems of this earth will eventually be solved. And won't that be a great day? I look forward to it. I hope you do, and pray for it. You know, as even Rabbi Akiva in the Talmud, you know, one of the greatest sages, as they say in the whole Talmud, longed every day for this Mashiach to come of his life and in our lives. So let's go to the New Testament now. We'll see where this Messiah left, and we'll see him coming also back to the Mount of Olives. And it's a prophecy that must be fulfilled. If we go to Acts, the book of Acts in chapter 1, I'm going to read verses 9 through 12 here. And this is referring to Yeshua, or Yahshua. Many of you call him Jesus in the society today and in the modern cultures. Now when he had spoken these things while they watched, his disciples, and here's two men here watching him, he was taken up, and a cloud received him. So notice, a cloud received him. He will come back in the cloud as well. Interesting, he's going to say this here. Then he went out of their sight, and while they looked steadfastly toward heaven as he went up, behold, two men stood by them. So I don't know how many were witnessing this at the time, but it says them. But there were two men in white apparel. They were messengers or angels or men. Regardless, here it just says they were there. And this is what they said, who said, Men of Galilee, why do you stand gazing up into heaven? This same Yeshua, or Jesus, who was taken up from you into heaven will also come likewise in like manner as you saw him go up into heaven. So he went up into the cloud, he's going to come back in a cloud. And from the Mount of Olives. How do we know that? Where does it say Mount of Olives? Okay, good question. Go to the next verse. Verse 12. It says, Then they returned to Jerusalem from the mount called Olivet, or the Mount of Olives. Simply called the Mount of Olives, or Mount of Olivet, which is near Jerusalem. So here we see his feet left. That's where his feet last were. And he can be here in spirit and through the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, and through visions and through angelic messengers and representatives of him. But he will come back literally to this earth, not again until he comes back the same way he went up. And of course in a more powerful, glorious way, and every eye will see, as we see in other scriptures, every eye that is alive at the time, especially, for sure. And therefore he will fulfill Zechariah 14:4. He will ascend from the sky and from the clouds, and his feet will set on the Mount of Olives. And also Zechariah 12:10. I can't leave that out of the picture as well, where it says, I will pour out on the house of David and on the house and the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace. Yes, and supplication. Then they will look upon whom they have pierced. Interesting. Look at the Hebrew there, if you know Hebrew. Whom they pierced. Yes, they will mourn for him as one mourns for his only son. This is referring primarily to the Jewish people, and also anyone who is there. And grieve for him as one grieves for a firstborn. And that's when they will cry out, Baruch haba Bashem Adonai. Or if his name is revealed to you, you will say that. Yud He Vav He, and some people say Yahweh, Yehovah, or Yahweh. And we don't have the vowels tracing back, or the pronunciations in different dialects. And I hope that doesn't offend you. I don't mean it in any disgraceful or vain way, but I mean it in a glorious way. His name, if you call upon his name, there are awesome scriptures and promises to that. But, the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament, clearly explains that Messiah's faithful ones will meet him in the air. Yes. And whether you're Jew or whether you're Gentile, if you're of the first fruits, the first calling, the first resurrection as well, or alive at the time, you will meet him and you will help him take care of the evil forces that will resist this true world government, this new world order that will be under the true Messiah, and put an end to this end time Holocaust that is going to be the worst Holocaust in all human history. It's going to be the worst in all human history. And I don't mean to smile and laugh about that. It's very sad, but he's going to put an end to it. And that's where we can laugh and smile and say, yes, in the end, we win. We will be champions. But it's important to realize that we who are believers will inherit the earth. It's not just floating up and going into heaven for 1,000 years or more so. It's actually helping out this earth. We will inherit the earth. And this is important to see because a lot of Christianity doesn't believe that. They just believe in the heaven and that's it. They don't go much further than that. But we'll go to the Brit Hadashah, but before we do, the New Testament, look at Psalms chapter 2, verses 7 and 8. In Psalms chapter 2, and there's others as well, but let me just expound upon this one in verses 7 through 10. Let me read that to you, and I appreciate your patience and your passion to continue learning, any open mind that you have, and to check up on me, not just believe me and be naive or gullible, but to really, with an open mind, prove all things here. It says in Psalms 2, beginning in verse 7, I will declare the decree. Now, not any Nicene decree or creed, but the decree of the Almighty who said to me, and this is the Mashiach, this is actually a messianic prophecy here, you are my son. And of course Israel was his firstborn son too. Today I have begotten you. Ask for me and I will give you the nations of your inheritance and the ends of the earth for your possession. So this is referring to a messianic prophecy. Yes, Israel is the firstborn son as well, but you can't separate Messiah from Israel, and you can't separate Israel from Messiah. If you do, you only have half the picture, half the puzzle. And so I want to encourage you to integrate them both to understand the fullness of the truth here. Ask of me, and I will give you the nations for your inheritance. This is referring to the Messianic prophecy. And the ends of the earth for your possession. You will break them with a rod of iron, referring to the nations. You will dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. So no nations will be able to fight against this Messiah and his people Israel. And I'm also referring to those who are grafted in. If you read Romans 11:11 onward, you'll see that even the Gentiles are to become Israel. And so it's important to realize this prophecy. And continuing here in verse 10, now therefore be wise, O kings. For those of you who want to be future kings of this new world order, the true government of the Messiah, be instructed. So now you're getting to not just the Messiah, but also those, he'll be the King of kings. And so Israel and those who are grafted in, he says, be instructed, you judges of the earth. So we are in training right now. If you're a believer, you are in training to help be a judge, to help be a leader, to help be a future king and a royal priesthood over this earth. He says, the earth. Also in Matthew, let me go to the New Testament here. The Brit Hadashah and Judaism, they understand that the Mashiach will be ruling on the earth, but a lot of Christianity doesn't. So let's go to Mattiyahu here, Matthew chapter 5 in verse 5. It says, the meek shall inherit. Does it say heaven? No. It says the meek shall inherit the earth. The meek shall inherit the earth. And also if we turn to chapter 19, verse 28, it says, and so Messiah, Yeshua, said to them, assuredly I say to you, that in the regeneration, this is the regeneration, when the Son of Man, here we see the term Son of Man, Messiah, Mashiach, sits on the throne of his glory, you shall have followed me. Will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. This is here on earth, okay? And you can continue that also in that chapter. It's interesting. Now in Romans, I'll also read Romans, 2 more verses here. If we go to Romans, well, I got it here. Here it says in Romans 4 and verse 13, it says, for the promise that he would be the heir of the world. Here's the heir, the inheritance of the world, was not to Abraham or his seed through the law, but through the righteousness of faith. So yes, not just faith without righteousness, but how do we understand righteousness? Psalms 119, verse 172 says, all thy commandments are righteousness. They teach us how to love him, how to love each other. So through faith and righteousness, we shall inherit this world. We have to have faith. Without faith, it's not any good. We can't earn anything. We don't deserve anything. But we give it up. We give up our lives however we can, whatever we need to be like a living sacrifice, to live as he wants us to live, and to be leaders as he wants us to lead. In Revelation chapter 2, verse 26, here we see again, and he who overcomes, you have to be an overcomer, and keeps my works, works. It says, and keeps his works. Until the end, to him I will give power over the nations. So you're not going to earn it through your works, but it'll be a reward. And being over the nations here on this earth, not again, as I said, not just up in heaven somewhere only, but down here on this earth. So if you see these prophecies, these scriptures, any differently than I do, please share them with me. You can comment publicly, and I'll be glad to respond publicly, or you can contact me privately on our website. which also in the listing in the description of this video message here. And I want to have the right conclusions. I want to understand the Talmud better. I want to understand the Tanakh, the Brit Hadashah. I want to understand everything better. And if you understand anything better than me in this regard, please share that with me and correspond. And let's grow together. As iron sharpens iron, let's sharpen each other. And yes, sparks do fly. Sometimes when we're sharpening that iron with iron, there will be some sparks and heated correspondence perhaps, but let's love each other and agree to differ when we have to. And no name calling. I'll remove any comments that are disrespectful, that are put downs, that are not listening, and truly you have to listen to this whole message as well. If I can tell that you're not, by some comments that are showing obviously not listening, then I'll remove that as well. But nevertheless, when our Jewish Messiah, Moshiach, comes to this earth literally soon, hopefully we will also fulfill Matthew chapter 23 verse 39, where it says, "You shall see me no more till you say, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." Or as we say in Hebrew, Baruch haba Bashem Adonai.